Hello there, Mr. Sutton here, bringing you the IM3 Honors 1-5 Part 1 homework solutions on function families. For the graph of a linear function, we're looking for literally a straight line. So that would be out of all of these graph I right here. And then in terms of the example of that function, we're looking for something with an x to the first power as the highest power. So looking at all of these ones, this 2x minus 3, that's mx plus b form. So choice P gives us a function. For a graph of a quadratic equation, we're looking for a parabola, a U shape, so that would be choice C here. And then for an example of the function, we want something with an x to the second power. So out of all of these choices, this y equals 2x squared is an example of a quadratic, choice N. For the graph of a cubic function, we're looking for the snake shape. So that would be this choice A right here. So that'll be our graph. And then for the function itself, we're looking for something with an x cubed. That's why it's a cubic, so x to the third. So y equals 7x cubed, choice L, will be our function. For the graph of a rational function, we're looking for something with two branches and some vertical and horizontal asymptotes. So graph F right here would be a rational function. And then for an example, we're looking for something that has a fraction with an x in the denominator. So that would be, let's see here, example O with this 2x in the denominator. That'll be our function. For the graph of the absolute value function, we're looking for a v. So that's choice E here. And the function with the absolute value, an example, is going to have the absolute value symbol. So that's these vertical lines here in choice K, tipping us off that this is our function. To pick out the graph of a radical or square root function, and by radical we mean even radicals, we're looking for something that would initially have an R shape and has an endpoint. The endpoint is the biggest tip-off here, because choice B looks like kind of an R, but we have a vertical asymptote, not really an endpoint. This is going forever. So the only one with an endpoint out of all of these is graph G. And this is basically a radical function that has been rotated or reflected a few times. So G for the graph. Now for the function example, that's a little easier to pick out. We're just looking for something with a square root, and the only function with that is choice J. For this one, I'm trying to pick out the graph of an exponential function. So the tip-off here is I'm looking for something that might have an L shape or a backwards L shape, and also something that has a horizontal asymptote. So out of all of these, we see choice D has a horizontal asymptote, and that's the only one that just has a horizontal one. So D is going to be our graph of our exponential function. For the function itself, the algebraic form of this, we're looking for something that has an x in the exponent. So that would only be this choice R, where we have this 3 to the x with a power of x. For this one, I want to figure out the graph of the logarithmic function. So I'm looking for something that has a vertical asymptote and may have an R shape if it's not upside down. So taking a look here, we have no asymptote in A. B looks like we have a vertical asymptote, so this is probably the log graph. But let's just keep looking. No asymptotes in C, no vertical one in D, E. F has two branches, so that's not the log function. And then G, H, and I don't have vertical asymptotes either. So really, by process of elimination, choice B is the best one there. Now for the function itself, we're just looking for something that has either a log or an ln, log natural kind of thing going on. The only one with either of those is choice Q, where we have log base 7 of x. For the graph of a sinusoidal function, I'm looking for something that kind of has a wave that's oscillating back and forth, and that's definitely graph H here. Now for the function itself, I'm looking for either sine or cosine, and that's only going to be answer choice M. To pick a linear function out of this graphical lineup, I'm looking for a straight line, so that's going to be choice G. And now for an example of that, I'm looking for something with an x to the first power. So let's see here. J we've got second, K we've got third power. This is absolute value. Choice M has a 2x, but we have a sine of that. So that's also not a linear function. It's not until you get all the way to the end here, this negative 2/3 x, that we have an x to the first power with nothing else going on. So choice R. To find a quadratic graph, I'm looking for a parabola, either a happy face or a frowny face, a U basically. Now, in here in I, we have an upside down U, so this actually is a quadratic. It's just one with a negative out in front. So I for the graph. And then for the function of that, an example, we're looking for something with an x to the second power. So the very first one here, negative x squared, this is going to be a quadratic. Choice J. For the cubic graph, I'm looking for a snake kind of shape. Looks like choice F is going to be our best bet on this one. And then for the function itself, I want something with an x to the third power. Now, it's a little bit tough to spot, but you see this third power here in choice K. This would be x to the third if we were to actually multiply this whole parentheses out and expand it. So K is going to be our function for this. Nothing else has an x to the third power. For the graph of a rational function, I'm looking for something with vertical and horizontal asymptotes and two different branches happening. So graph E has all that kind of action going on. And now for the algebra function of this, an example of it, I'm looking for something with an x in the denominator. So a fraction with an x in the denominator. Going through my choices, it looks like choice N, we have an x plus 2 in the denominator, so that's going to make this behave as a rational function, so choice N. For absolute value, the graph is going to look something like a V. It might be upside down, like this one in graph B, but it's going to be a V one way or another. And then for the actual example of a function, I want something with an absolute value symbol like we have here in choice L. For the square root or even radical graph, I'm looking for something that is kind of R-shaped and has an endpoint. So looking through my graphs here, I see H has kind of an R shape, and the most important piece, though, is that it looks like it has an endpoint right here. So H is our best answer out of all of these. Nothing else even appears to have some kind of endpoint. And then for the algebraic example of this, we're looking for something with a square root or some kind of radical. Choice Q has that, so that's our answer for this one. For finding the graph of an exponential function, I'm looking for something that is kind of an L shape and has a horizontal asymptote. So we've got really two major candidates here, choices A and C. Now, taking a look at both of these, A has a horizontal asymptote, C has a vertical asymptote. We're actually crossing the horizontal here, though. So choice A is a better answer for that. And then for the algebraic example, we're looking for something that has a variable in the exponent itself. So choice O here with this x plus 2 in the power is going to be our exponential. To find the graph of a logarithmic function, I'm generally looking for something with kind of an R shape with no endpoints, but I don't really see anything out there like that. I've got this h, but it's got an endpoint, so this is actually the square root function. My other thing I'm looking for, the real telltale sign, is something that just has a vertical asymptote and like one branch. That's going to be this choice C here. We've got this vertical asymptote. This is actually an upside down logarithmic graph. It's a log with like a negative out in front. So that is our best answer out of all of these. Now for the function, that's a little easier to spot algebraically. I'm looking for something that either has a log or an ln in it, and p, we've got this log base 4 of x, so that's going to be my logarithmic graph, or my logarithmic function. For the graph of a sinusoidal function, I'm looking for something that's a wave and keeps repeating. The only one that's close to that is choice D. And now for the example of the function, I'm looking for either a sine or cosine function. And I see here in choice M that I have the sine function. So M is my best answer for this one.